Hello, boys and girls. My name is Mr. Fox, and I'm here at Linda Elementary School in Linda, California. And today I'm going to read a book entitled Paul Bunyan, A Tall Tale, retold and illustrated by Stephen Kellogg. Paul Bunyan was the largest, smartest, and strongest baby ever born in the state of Maine. Look at that, as a baby's picking up a whole cow. Even before he learned to talk, Paul showed an interest in the family logging business. He took the lumber wagon and wandered through the neighborhood collecting trees. Wow, look at that great big huge tree. Just pulled it up by the trunk there, and it fell over and hit the church, and the bells coming down, and people are jumping out of their windows. Wow. There were so many complaints about Paul's visit that his parents, anchored his cradle in the harbor. Look at him. He's out there feeding his bottle to a baby seal. All was well until Paul started rocking the cradle and stirring up waves. After his parents had paid for the damage, they decided to move to the backwoods where life would be more peaceful. Look at that. He's waving his cradle out there in the bay, and it's causing a great tsunami, and it's going all over the town, and people are panicking and getting on top of their roofs. Do you see it? It's amazing. Paul loved his new wilderness home. He soon grew into a sturdy lad who was so quick on his feet he could blow out a candle and leap into bed before the room got dark. Every day he joined his forest friends in their sports. He raced with the deer and wrestled with the grizzlies. Wow, look at him with that great big old huge grizzly there. One morning, Paul awoke to find the world under a blanket of blue snow. He heard a moan from inside a snowdrift, and there he found a shivering ox calf. Paul adopted him and named him Babe. Both Paul and Babe began growing at an astonishing rate, but the ox never lost the color of the snow from which he had been rescued. As the years passed, the two of them proved to be extremely helpful in the family business. At 17, Paul grew a fine beard, which he combed with the top of a pine tree. By this time, other settlers were beginning to crowd into Maine's woods. Paul felt an urge to move on. He said goodbye to his parents and headed west. Paul wanted to cross the country with the best lumbering crew available. He hired Ola, a celebrated blacksmith, and two famous cooks, Sourdough Slim and Cream Puff Fatty. Then he signed up legendary lumbermen like Big Tim Burr, Hard Jaw Murphy, and the Seven Hackett brothers. Paul put the camp building on wheels so that Babe could haul them from one forest to another. As soon as he had cleared the land, pioneers moved in to set up farms and villages. On the far slopes of the Appalachian Mountains, several of Paul's men were ambushed by a gang of underground ogres called gumboros. Paul grabbed the camp dinner horn and blew a thunderous note into the gumboros' cave, determined to blast the meanness right out of them. To Paul's dismay, the gumburros responded by snatching the entire crew. A wild, rough, and tumble rumpus began inside the den. Man, look at that gumburro. He sure is ugly. When that historic tussle was over, the gumburros needed 6 weeks to untangle themselves. They disappeared in the depths of the earth, and they never have been heard of since then. Paul's next job was to clear the heavy forest Midwest. He hired armies of extra woodmen and built enormous new bunkhouses. The men sailed up to the bed in balloons and parachuted down to breakfast in the morning. Unfortunately, the cooks couldn't flip flapjacks fast enough to satisfy all the newcomers. To solve the muddle, Paul built a colossal flapjack griddle. The surface was greased by kitchen helpers with slabs of bacon lard and had it laced to their feet. Look at them skating around on that hot grill. And it looks like they're playing hockey. Every time the hot griddle was flooded with butter, it blasted a delicious flapjack high above the clouds. Usually the flapjacks landed neatly beside the griddle, but sometimes they were a bit off target. Paul took a few days off to dig the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes so that barges of Vermont maple syrup could be brought to the camp. Fueled by the powerful mixture of flapjacks and syrup, the men leveled the Great Plains and shaved the slopes of the Rocky Mountains. Wow! They possibly, or I guess that is probably, would have sawed the peaks themselves into logs if a blizzard hadn't suddenly buried the entire mountain range. That blizzard continued for several years, snuffed out the springs, summer, and autumn. The crew burrowed into their bunkhouse and hibernated. Babe became so depressed that Paul asked Ole to make a pair of sunglasses for his friend. When Babe saw the world colored green, he thought he stumbled into a fresh field of clover. He began eating the snow with such gusto that soon the treetops reappeared. Boy, look at that depressed old Blue there. He did need those sunglasses, I'm telling you right now. At that point, all those pent-up springtime simply exploded, dissolving the storm clouds and the remaining snow. Paul and his friends invited some newly arrival settlers to join them in a celebration of a holiday that had been missed. Oh, look at them. They're all dancing and having a wonderful time. And look at all the settlers coming in those prairie schooners there. I'll bet that was a great day. What do you think? After the festival, the lumberjacks continued their journey. But as they headed southwest, the blistering sun and the giant Texas varmints proved to be more of a problem than they had expected. Travel became so difficult that some of the men began to speak longly of being buried by a blizzard or bear hugged by a gumbaroo. While crossing Arizona, the griddle curled up like a burnt leaf, and the batter evaporated. Deprived of their flapjacks, the lumbermen became weak and discouraged. Paul's great axe fell from his shoulder, gouged a jagged trench, which today is known as the Grand Canyon. Disaster seemed certain until Paul came up with a desperate plan. He headed east and found a family that could sell him a barn filled with corn. Babe galloped it back across the desert. When the flaming sunrise hit, that barn exploded, and the lumbermen awoke to find themselves in a great raging blizzard of popcorn. Dizzy with joy, they pulled on their mittens and began blasting each other with popcorn balls. Look at that, man, right there in the middle of the desert. All of their corn turned to popcorn, and they're having a ball. A westerly wind kept the cooling clouds of popcorn swirling around Paul and his crew until they crossed California and reached the Pacific Ocean. There's Paul picking up a whale, and all the men are inside the ocean beaches, and they're just having a wonderful time. After he had crossed the country, some say that Paul gave up lumbering and rambled north searching for new areas of untouched wilderness. With the passing years, Paul had been seen less and less frequently. However, along with his unusual size and strength, he seemed to possess an extraordinary longevity. Sometimes his great bursts of laughter can be heard rumbling like distant thunder across the wild Alaskan mountain range, where he and Babe still roam. Well, if you ever go to Alaska, look up Paul and Babe. I'm Mr. Fox, and I'm here at Linda Elementary School in beautiful Linda, California.